Today on Locked On Red Wings, we do a crossover with Jon Chik of the Locked On New York Rangers as we preview the second matchup against those pesky New York Rangers.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome back, Ranger fans and Red Wing fans. As you guys can see, those of you watching on YouTube, we have a very special crossover edition for you guys here today. This is Jon Chik with Locked On New York Rangers, joined by my good friends Brian Fisher and Scott Bentley of Locked On Detroit Red Wings. And guys, I figure, Rangers, Red Wings, obviously playing each other Thursday night. Might as well just jump into it. And first question for you guys, it wasn't too long ago where the Red Wings were having one of the worst seasons that we've ever seen, and having to rebuild and everything. And here they are just a couple of years later, 7-3-3. Seems like they're kind of moving in the right direction. What's it been like for you guys? I know it's still early, but, growing by leaps and bounds over these last couple of seasons here.
I mean, it's been obviously really nice. That's the first thing that, first and foremost, it's been really nice this year so far. This year's been weird because the record looks really good, but when they have lost, they have lost. It is really a unique situation where the record is really good, but the games that they've lost have been such just complete annihilations that they are discouraging, and you're like, wow, that's almost counts as 2 losses. It was what it feels like 8 goals against type of stuff. So no, but it's been really nice. And obviously this offseason was, I don't know, Brian, most talent brought in a single offseason in half a decade, probably longer. It was really, really encouraging. And obviously the young talent pool that they already had established from last season. And it's definitely, hope on the horizon type of stuff.
Yeah, to be honest, I really didn't know. I don't really know how to process how good of a start this has been because, last year the Red Wings got out to in air quotes hot start, as when they were a game above 500 for the most of the season until it finally fell off. But they're comfortably above a 500 point percentage right now. And coming into recording on Wednesday here, they were second in the division still. So I haven't really been able to process. It feels almost it doesn't feel safe. Is what I'm trying to say. Is you can't really get comfortable in the Atlantic Division, especially with where the Red Wings are at in the standings. And I absolutely love where they're at and how they're playing. But, there's also huge red flags as well, as in the fact that 5-on-5, they continually get outplayed in almost every single game. The game against Montreal Canadiens, they actually outplayed the Canadiens and lost that game. Go figure. But through most games, they actually get outplayed at 5-on-5 pretty often. And also just the amount of injuries that they have had. Obviously, we lost Bertuzzi, who's going to come back soon. Jake Wallman's going to come back soon. Pissick and Fabry are still ways away. Vrana's out indefinitely. Now we lost. Sundqvist could be coming back. Sundqvist could be coming back against the Rangers, in fact. But now Luff is out, 8 to 10 weeks, Scotty, after having surgery on his wrist.
Yeah, really dirty hit, honestly, in the Montreal game that led to, he's out 8 to 10.
I mean, the Red Wings have been absolutely carried to a 7-3-3 record by exceptional special teams and fantastic goaltending. And I love it. I absolutely love it, but I'm not going to ignore. That's what I did last year. Was the problem is they got out to a hot start and I started to ignore the problems that were blatant. And I'm not going to do that this year because the reality is there. I could see the cracks. It's whether or not they address those cracks is going to be what makes or breaks the season for them.
I got you. And, Brian, you actually hit on something there that I've glossed over a couple times. Haven't really talked about it in a lot of detail on my show, but you mentioned how good the Atlantic Division is. I mean, the Metro's really good. It's at the point now where you look at the entire Eastern Conference, really, and there are no bad teams. I mean, you've got Columbus that's 3-9 to start the season. So I guess there's at least one if you go by their record. And the Senators in a little bit of a tailspin. I think they've lost 6 in a row. But other than that, I mean, there's no easy games. There's no teams that you can really rule out as far as being playoff contenders. Just your thoughts on that. I mean, just an absolutely, what seems to be just a completely stacked, not just division, but an entirely stacked conference this year, the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I mean, even the teams you just listed, one has Johnny Hockey on it. That can't be like like an easy win, right? Like
They beat the
you have
Rangers.
that,
Yeah.
and like the Sens, obviously, like like every single year is the Sens year, and I know it's like a funny joke because they have yet to really like live up to it. But in the same breath, they always suck the first month of the season, like always, like perpetually. It's actually remarkable how year in and year out they are terrible for the first like 4 to 6 weeks. So like I have faith that they'll recover and still be a middle of the pack team in our division. Like I don't know, man. Like I agree with you, and when we've talked about that, Brian and I talked about that going into the season when we were kind of doing our like season outlooks and projections and stuff. Like the Eastern Conference is just tough, and I think the Wings are in the best division in hockey, and the Eastern Conference is the best conference in hockey.
I mean, absolutely. The thing that's been wild to me is how it's almost been with, I mean, obviously the Rangers are performing well, but it, as far as my expectations went, it's been almost like the complete 180 of that. I mean, I didn't know where to put the Devils. I knew they had all the talent, but I wasn't sure when or if they would ever put it together. I had them like second to last in the Metro, and I had the Flyers last in the Metro, and both those teams out to a hot start. The Devils, one of the best teams at 5-on-5 so far this season. They dominate 5-on-5 play. It's insane. The Rangers and Carolina are pretty much as advertised, but in the Atlantic Division, Tampa Bay and Toronto are off to, more sluggish starts, starting to heat up now. Florida Panthers off to a slow start. The Sabres got off to a hot start, and they were quickly racking up wins. And then Buffalo, who every year people are like, they're going to fall off, are 10-2-0, maybe 12-2-0 now. It's been a second since I've checked the standings as far as their record goes, but it's been a little bit different than what I thought it would shake out, but there's still it's still a highly competitive conference. Like you said, the Penguins went out to the West Coast and started to just lose games, which is nice to see because screw the Pens.
I'm with you there, yeah.
But
the Penguins are nobody's second favorite team. Have you ever noticed that? Like if you're not a Penguins fan, you don't like them. They're one of your 3 most disliked teams in the league for sure.
It's one of those things, John, where the league marketed them so heavily, they were so in your face for so long because of Sidney Crosby that everyone kind of came to hate them by consequence. And so if you're not a Penguins fan, you hate them. But it's still fantastic marketing.
And just, yes, but also just because Crosby and them have been so competitive for so long and like have played a lot, like making the cup and everything, like have played a lot from both conferences. Like at some point they've beat your team in heartbreaking fashion. Like at some point they have ruined a season for you at some point. Us obviously probably more famously than a lot of other teams, but still like they have done something dirty to your team at some point.
Or they beat your entire nation in heartbreaking fashion.
Right. Or you lead the forefront for Team Canada. Right.
Yep. I'll freely admit a little part of it certainly is jealousy because they've won the cup 3 times in the Crosby era. Rangers haven't won the cup in almost 30 years now, so that is part of it. But I think we can all agree that the Penguins are nobody's second favorite team, as I was saying. But turning our attention back to this game here tonight, I'm really intrigued by Detroit's goaltender situation because, before last year, they bring in Nedeljkovic, and he had been great with the Canes. Small sample size, but played really well there. Scuffled for you guys last year. Not off to a great start this year either. 434 goals against average in 5 games. And they also bring in Ville Husso this offseason, and he's been awesome. 186 goals against in 8 games. So, I mean, how do you guys see this whole thing shaking out, the goaltender situation? Is it possible that Husso just kind of runs away with this thing and Nedeljkovic ends up, being the backup?
I got some stats written down here.
Here we go.
All right. So currently, Ville Husso is 3rd in the league in save percentage, 2nd in the league in goals against average, and 5th in the league in goals saved above expected. So saying he's been fantastic is an understatement. He's been one of the best goaltenders in the league on a team that gives up a lot of shots. I talked about it earlier, but when you look at their course, you look at their shots against, they get outshot in nearly every single game, and he is standing on his head game in and game out. And you ask about how it's shaking out. Nedeljkovic started off last season playing very strong and quickly took on added responsibility because Thomas Greiss struggled. And as the season went on and the wear and tear of a full season began to wane on Nedeljkovic, he began to struggle as well. And that's when when the team started giving up 10 goals a night, he was in net. And so, I think that his biggest problem is kind of like what we saw from Peter Mrazek back when he was with the Detroit Red Wings. He's susceptible to hot streaks and cold streaks, and that he tends to overplay his position, and where he gets himself out of position trying to overcommit to one side, and that's where goals tend to happen. He does tend to give some soft ones up as well, but he's not necessarily a bad goalie, and by no means have I given up on Alex Nedeljkovic. He just had a great performance against your Rangers on Sunday evening, and he played great, and it was a bounce back game. But I mean, that's one good game so far this season. He has definitely struggled behind a defense that is much worse, admittedly, than the Carolina Hurricanes defense was. Meanwhile, Ville Husso has been an absolute stud. And so you're going to want to just continue, except for games where you want to give him a break, like they did in the second half of that back-to-back this past weekend, go back to Ville Husso, because like I said, third best in save percentage, second best in goals against average, and fifth best in goals saved above expected. And that for me is the real fun number in goals saved above expected. It means he's been saving, I think it was like 7.5 goals saved above expected. That's an insane number of goals that he has saved above expected. Yeah. Ville Husso all day, every day until his body breaks down. We're running him into the ground.
Yeah,
hopefully not.
Hopefully definitely, not. It's definitely at a minimum, it's a 1A, 1B situation at a minimum. And it's probably currently probably more than that. Yeah.
I'm on the train. Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah, he's been crushing it for sure.
No, he's been great. And I mean, I think this is his first real chance to be a starting goalie in this league. And, I'm sure maybe bit of a chip on his shoulder, never really getting this opportunity in the past. And I mean, he's still kind of got to hold off Nedeljkovic a little bit, but I mean, there's certainly an opportunity to be had there. I figure, guys, we'll continue to break this one down in just a second. But first, we do have to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. We've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're the always fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. And all three of us would just like to thank everybody for making Locked On New York Rangers and Locked On Detroit Red Wings your first two listens every day. And we are free and available on all platforms. And so, something else I got to ask you guys about, because it's one of those things that's always going to be there. Alexis, Lafreniere, Lucas Raymond, and we kind of had this debate the last time. And, Raymond off to a pretty solid start. What do you guys see from him? And are you happy with where he is, at this point in his career?
I think yes, people are thrilled with where he's at so far in his career. I think like that was a on draft night. The feeling was so.
Don't bring me back to that day. Don't bring me back to that day.
No, but it was so unique because we were so upset, because that was the year that you alluded to. It was one of the worst hockey teams we've ever seen, and we got gifted with the 4th overall pick. And so that was obviously a very frustrating time, and people were rightfully very upset. But I think people jumped on the Lucas Raymond not bandwagon, but like hype train, like almost immediately. Because if you remember on draft night, it was very much a 3-player draft, right? Like it was Laffy, and then it was Byfield, and then it was Stützle. And so everybody was like, that's the top 3. And then after that is where it gets a little shaky. And of course, the Red Wings are terrible and have the 4th pick in a 3-player draft. And Raymond was highlighted as the dude that was like, hey, this dude just didn't get playing time. Like, he just didn't get ice time with the team that he was with in his draft year. And he had great production when he did play, but he just literally wasn't getting like a lot of ice time. And there was like rumors about, like what his, coach's philosophy was on his team and everything. And there was a ton of rumors and stuff swirling around. And so I think people, whether it was a coping mechanism or not, really early on, were like, all right, no, this dude's really good. It's just he didn't get playing time, and like he'll get playing time and be really good. And then due to injuries, amongst other things, made the team probably a lot quicker than people realize, making the team on opening night last season. And hit the ground running, was the Calder favorite for probably the first 3 months of the season, and then kind of slipped, and Sider's resurgence obviously kind of took over everything. But yeah, I think people are really pumped, and nobody will ever forget the everyone will compare Laffy and Raymond forever in Detroit, just because of how that night and how that lottery went down. But no one is upset that we got Raymond, and everyone's a huge fan, and everyone really believes in his future for sure.
Literally anytime from here on out to the end of the NHL's tenure as a professional sports organization, whenever somebody wins the number 1 overall pick, I will always say you're welcome. Because if not for the Red Wings getting as screwed as hard as they did in 2020, the lottery system would not have gotten overhauled. One of the worst team records in modern history, and they ended up with the 4th, which is the worst pick they could have gotten. And then the Rangers, was it back-to-back years? You had 2nd overall and then 1st overall, and was the 1st overall year the year you were in the bubble?
Yes,
you made the playoffs.
The way that worked, the way
that's why I was so pissed. That's
right. It's insane the amount of things that had to happen for the Rangers to pick first that year. So first of all, the fact that a team that was going to get eliminated in the bubble round, the qualifying round, whatever it was called, there were 24 teams in the playoffs that year, and it was complete madness. But that had, I don't remember the exact percentage, but that had a very small percentage chance of happening. So it was going to be one of the 8 teams that got eliminated in the qualifying round. The Rangers were one of those teams. And so now you've got a 1 in 8 chance. And I remember going into the qualifying round that year, there were certain fans that were saying like, oh man, they should just lose because then they could get the 1st overall pick. And I'm like, well, what kind of mentality is that? Like, you play to win, you're in the playoffs, go win a playoff series if you can. And on top of that,
remember that.
On top of that, you've got a 1 in 8 chance. It's not like it's a good chance of happening. And then there I am watching, the lottery that night, and the ping pong ball comes up, and I see some blue in the logo, and it zooms in, and there's the Rangers. I was like, oh my God, we're getting Lafreniere. And of course, a little bit up and down. I mean, the points haven't always been there. I'm still hopeful that he can become, a really good player in this league. Had a nice run in the playoffs last year, but I mean, man, what a just whirlwind of events, that whole process for all of us.
I'm so envious, man, of that draft luck that the Rangers had in like I said, back-to-back years, jump up to number 2 to get Kakko, and then jump up to number 1 to get Lafreniere, where it felt like it should have been the Red Wings year. Obviously, I'm very happy with the outcome. I'm very happy with Lucas Raymond. He's been phenomenal. But I mean, I did want to ask you about Kakko and Lafreniere, because, obviously we saw them on Sunday, and they're not off to bad starts, but for guys who are taken 2nd and 1st overall, you'd expect them to be playing a little bit bigger of a role in the offense, and it just doesn't seem like they're quite doing that, living up to that expectation. Again, they're not bad, but
yeah. That's a fair assessment. I think at this point, Kakko's in year 4, Lafreniere is in year 3. I think at this point, all of us Ranger fans figured that the two of them would probably be a little bit further along than they are. There's different reasons for that. Limited power play time obviously holds the points down a little bit. And up until this year, they were mostly both playing on the 3rd line. I mean, you get the occasional cameo in the top 6, but for the most part, they were 3rd-line players. But I will say that I think that both of them have played better this season than their point total would indicate, especially Kakko. I would say over the last 3 or 4 games, 3 or 4 game stretch here, including the game against the Detroit Red Wings, Kakko has arguably been the best Ranger forward. He's finally getting it going as far as points are concerned. He's all over the ice. He is very strong when it comes to puck possession, and that's a skill that he did not take advantage of in his first 2 seasons in the league. And you can kind of understand why. 18-year-old kid, and who's this hot shot, high draft pick. He probably wants to be a good teammate and set up all his teammates for goals and not be a puck hog. But by that same token, nobody's going to get mad at you. If you can drive the play and you can maintain possession and keep possessions alive in the offensive zone, those are all good things. And he's finally starting to do that. He recently, in just this past game, got to play with Mika and with Panarin on the top line. It looks like now for this game, they're going to put the kid line back together. So I'm very curious to see what they can do. Obviously, Chytil, Lafreniere, and Kakko, that was the kid line last year in the playoffs. They did a hell of a job in the postseason run for the Rangers. You were kind of hoping they could pick up where they left off. They haven't really. I mean, they've both been all right, like you said. But I'm hoping that, this Ranger team needs a spark right now. And I'm hoping that the kid line being back together, that can provide it. But we shall see.
I mean, I'm just thinking if those two guys had become the superstars that everyone thought, the Rangers would be just a juggernaut of a team because between perennial Norris contender in Adam Fox, you got Panarin, you got Zibanejad is playing well, Chris Kreider is doing a very good job, and you signed Vincent Trocheck. I mean, there's just a lot. Obviously, Igor Shesterkin, can't forget him in net, a Vezina candidate.
Crazy goalie situation in
Crazy
New
goalie
York.
situation.
Yeah.
I mean, if those two guys can become what the Rangers fans had hoped they would become, the Rangers are a juggernaut. Yeah, they're still very young. I mean, it took McKinnon a few years to become McKinnon. He didn't come out of the gate and was McKinnon immediately. But I mean, it's just those two guys could make the difference for the Rangers in between being a playoff contender and a Stanley Cup contender.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I talked about all year last year, pretty much. The Rangers got off to a good start. There were times where Igor Shesterkin was kind of bailing them out and stealing wins for them. And, that's all well and good. But the Rangers eventually took off. And the thing that I kept saying all last season through the regular season was, if Kakko and Lafreniere, and you could even throw Philip Hedl in there as well, another former first-round draft pick. If those three guys, or, one or two of them even, if they start to really take off, then that's when this team becomes really dangerous. And we saw that kind of come to fruition in the playoffs this past season. I mean, that line was a huge part of the Rangers, the playoff run that they had there. It was really cool to see, and you just hope that eventually they can get back to that form, and hopefully reuniting the three of them does the trick for them for sure.
Absolutely.
You want to talk about the game?
Oh, yeah. What do you got, Scotty?
I guess my biggest thing is, we played y'all relatively recently. And I think my biggest thing is just going into this game, I don't know if it's too cookie cutter to just be like, what's going to be different this time? But I think that this is a Rangers team that was significantly better than how they performed. I mean, the most recent time we played y'all, the shots was the most alarming thing. For halfway through the game, or even through the first two periods, y'all barely had any shots. How have y'all been playing since then, and what's the outlook for this one?
Scotty breaking out the y'alls today.
Yeah,
I'm a big y'all guy. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the only game they've played since then was last night. Depending on when you're listening to this, I should probably just say what day it was. It was Tuesday night at home against the Islanders. Pretty much a nightmare of a game. The Rangers were down 1-0. They got up 3-1. They're up 3-1 going into the third period. Islanders score 3 goals and the Rangers lose. And so 2 straight home games between the Islanders and also the game against your Red Wings, where the Rangers were at home, had a 2-goal lead, and lost the game. And it's probably too early to panic, but by that same token, these are things that we just didn't see from the Rangers last year. This is why all season I felt like they were a dangerous team, despite the fact that they were getting no respect and no credit from anybody. There were things that they did last year that they're just not doing this year. Last year, for example, excellent third period team, second or third in the league in goal differential in the third period. They got away from taking bad penalties. They've been kind of taking some bad penalties so far this season. Too many instances this season where they're shooting themselves in the foot. I actually, before we record here, went back and watched the 2 regulation goals that Detroit scored against them. And not taking anything away from Detroit. Very impressive win for you guys, coming back from 2 down on the road. But you look at that, the first goal was the result of a turnover. And then the second goal was the result of just a terrible, sloppy line change where nobody should have been going to the bench. Detroit's rushing up the ice, and 3 Rangers are just drifting to the bench, and everybody's hung out to dry as a result of that. So yeah, just really weird. These are things that they did not do last season. And 3-game losing streak right now. They had a 4-game losing streak earlier this season, and it is still early, but sooner or later you got to turn this around, because if you continue like this, it gets to a point where this isn't just a slump anymore. This is almost who you're becoming. And I'm not there yet. I still think they'll get out of this and they'll, right the ship here. But man, they need a good showing here going into Detroit. A team that's off to a good start this season. But how about you guys? I mean, any thoughts on, what Detroit has to do to come away with 2 points here and beat the Rangers for a second time?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is, like I said at the start of the show, 5-on-5, they got to show up. I mean, you have got and it's tough, and it's hard to say that when your depth is getting hurt in games. And now, like I said, you're getting Sundqvist back to replace the injury that just occurred to Luff, more than likely getting him back. They said he was probable to play. But, I mean, you still don't have 2 of your top 6 forwards in Bertuzzi and Vrana. So you're asking guys like Kubalik to step up in roles, and he has. I mean, he scored the overtime winner against the Rangers the other day, and he's been phenomenal. He's tied for team leading points with 15 so far through the season. So you got to step up at 5-on-5. But you got to get shots on net, dude. They're just not. And obviously, they had like 40 shots the other night, and they had 36 against the Rangers. But overall, they continue to get outshot, and a lot of that is happening because they get a lot of power plays. They had 40 plus shots on net on Tuesday against the Montreal Canadiens because they had 7 power plays. And so, they're don't get me wrong, it's so tough with the Red Wings because their power play is a lot more lethal than it shows their ranking on the NHL right now. Because NHL has them ranked 27th because just based on percentage, and that's because percentage-wise they're 27th in the league because they blew, I think, 7 or 8. They didn't score a single one. Montreal took 7 or 8 penalties against the Red Wings on Tuesday, and the Red Wings didn't convert on a single one, but they looked lethal on every single one. So a lot of the bulk of their shots are coming on the power play. They need to get 5-on-5 shots. They need to get 5-on-5 possession. You talked about in the game against the Rangers, their regulation goals that occurred happened off the rush. The Red Wings are a one-and-done team. They don't establish zone presence at 5-on-5. So really the biggest thing is getting into the zone and then staying there, not getting into the zone, getting a shot off, and then coming back down the ice. They've been great at scoring off the rush, but that's not a formula for winning hockey games. Like you said about Shesterkin bailing out the Rangers, Husso's been doing that for the Red Wings just as much.
Yeah, this defense is still very much a work in progress. I think that's the biggest takeaway from me so far this season is it is undeniably better than it was in the second half of last season when we were talking about one of the worst defenses I've ever laid my eyes on. But like it's certainly, you can go up from there and still not be like that great. Like it's a low bar, and I think that's kind of what we're seeing now. To be fair, in the last 5 games, it's looked marginally better.
It's gotten better, yes.
Yeah, like it's been really good. And the Rangers game right in the middle of that was maybe the best defensive performance of the season, to be honest with you, from not only our defensemen, but from our forward group too. Just a really a great game defensively. So if they have just like the cheat sheet on the Rangers and just like have you all figured out, then that's great. Like that's obviously a recipe for success. But I think the biggest thing is going to be replicating that because that is the sole reason that they were able to get back into that game, obviously, and walk away with 2 points the last time we played you. So I think that for me, and then like there's stuff we talk, like Brian and I talk about every episode, like face-offs they're not very good at yet, and they have to get a lot better in the face-off circle and stuff like that. But I think for me, game in and game out, the biggest thing I attribute to us playing a competitive hockey game and not losing, 8-3 to Buffalo is just having somewhat competent defense for 60 minutes. And that's been few and far between over the last 3-4 years. Nonetheless, now, even though it has objectively taken a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I was just looking it up right now while Scotty was going on his point of view there. The Red Wings are 27th in shot attempts for and 28th for stopping shot attempts against in the league at 5-on-5. So, I mean, that's just to combine with what Scotty was just saying. There's this team, like I said at the start of the show, is the hot start they're getting off to is great, but it's mostly carried by phenomenal power play, phenomenal penalty kill, and great goaltending. Because at 5-on-5, if you play a clean game against us, the Red Wings probably aren't going to score that often, which it stinks to say. And I hate being pessimistic when the team's 7-3-3, but
our coach says that's the thing. Daily.
He says it daily. It's not just me.
He literally, in his media availability every single day, goes, yeah, we're just got to get better. We're not a very good 5-on-5 team. He'll just say it like, yeah, we're not very good there. And like, we have to get better. And like,
before the Red Wings
objective truth. Yeah.
First regulation loss, he had a pregame media availability and everyone's like, are you like, the Red Wings were what, like 4-0-2 to start the season, I think it was?
Yeah, they hadn't had a regulation.
They hadn't had a regulation loss. Last team in the league not to have a regulation loss. And they were like, how excited are you at the hot start? He's like, it's nice to see, but I mean, unless we get better at 5-on-5, it's not going to keep going. And then they lost that night because they couldn't play at 5-on-5. It was like,
Yeah.
oh wow, so he knows what he's talking about. Okay.
It's interesting to hear that because even last year, when the Rangers were having a good year and having their playoff run, the knock that everybody had on the Rangers, and it's not unfair, but it was that they weren't like the best 5-on-5 ever, especially compared to some of the other playoff teams, some of the other elite teams in the league, and that they were kind of over reliant on their power play. And I think that's kind of continued a little bit this season. So I suppose something has to give when these two teams are playing each other 5v5. Somebody's going to break out of it, have a big night for themselves.
Got a really good penalty kill though.
Yeah.
Ninth in the league, I think.
Yeah, I think they are. I was checking it before. I think Detroit's at number 9 right now for PK. Rangers are kind of middle of the road, but yeah, I figure you guys want to end. We can throw out some predictions as far as who's going to win or who's going to score goals. You guys want to start with this?
So we've actually transitioned away from the total, like the goal predictions, because it's just like we're going to pick our team to win. You're going to pick your team to win. That's how it goes. Instead, we've been using betonline.net's over under totals predictions for these games, and the over under total number of goals scored between the two goal. Let me start again.
You got it.
Over under total number of goals scored between these two teams. Thanks, Scotty, for always believing in me. Is 6. So are we saying between the two teams, they'll hit over 6 goals or under 6 goals? John, I want to start with you.
All right. Well, I was going to say 3-2 Rangers, although I will admit I actually picked against them doing the crossover with Gil. You can't pick them every single episode, or you're just going to lose credibility. But I think they'll find a way to win this one 3-2. The goalies are too good, and I think that the Rangers haven't really been scoring goals at quite the clip that you expect them to. I think it could turn into a little bit of a grind, and I think the Rangers will tighten things up defensively, especially with what happened the last time they played Detroit, giving up some goals in the rush. So yeah, to me, you never know for sure, but it has the makings of kind of a lower scoring game. So I will say 3-2 Rangers. And because in our crossover with Gil, I mentioned that I thought Filipino would score a goal. That hit for me. So I'm going to go with Filipino again. I think he scores another goal against Detroit here. Rangers take it 3-2 and take the under for BetOnline there. But I'll toss it to you guys. What do you got?
I think you're right with the under. I think that this has under written all over it, which is why naturally the over will be what happens. But this game really does have under written all over it. And for as much as we talked about kind of the I don't know if struggles are the right word, but the shortcomings that the Red Wings offense still has in some areas, they're scoring a solid amount of goals a night, and they're going out there and producing. So I think it's possible that I don't think the over is completely out of the question, but I will take the under. And yeah, I was thinking like 3-2 Wings or 4-2 with an empty netter Wings or something like that. So I think we kind of all agree that it's going to be a really close game, just like the last time. We just played y'all and it went into overtime. So I think that's probably safe. And man, for players on the wings, I don't know. Like Raymond might stay hot. He's been feeling himself lately, so that might be a nice one. You know what? I'm gonna go out on a limb here. Moritz Seider doesn't have a goal yet this year. That changes when this one. I'm gonna go a little spicy with it. We're gonna have Moritz Seider first goal of the season, and I'll go 4-2 with an empty netter Wings.
I like that a lot. So both the Rangers and the Red Wings are near the bottom of the league in goals for per 60 minutes. So I'm definitely taking the under on this one. Red Wings haven't scored more than 3 goals in a game. I think since the Anaheim Ducks game, Scotty, when they won like 5-1, I think, because the Sabres, they scored 2 or 3. And then, it was like 2-1 or 3-2 ever since then. Yeah. So definitely taking the under in this one, because especially if it's Shesterkin and Husso in that, I'm thinking it's going to be a goalie battle all the way through the end. And as far as the score prediction goes, yeah, I just got this gut feeling it might be Rangers in this one. I think it might be a tough 2-1 loss to the New York Rangers this time around. Get a little bit payback. And for the lone goal scorer for the Detroit Red Wings, you went with Seider. I'm going to stay with the hot hand and say Lucas Raymond's going to get a goal in this one. He started off the season. He only had 2 assists through the first 7 games. Fun fact, in the next 6 games, he hasn't registered a single assist, but he's had 5 goals. So he exchanged 2 assists in 7 games for 5 goals in 6.
It's a trade-off.
It's quite the trade-off. So he's come alive in scoring production. I think he's going to carry that over in this game and get that lone goal for the Detroit Red Wings, but definitely hitting that under.
All right, and I think with that we can pretty much call it a day here. But gentlemen, this is a pleasure as it always is, and definitely looking forward to doing another crossover in the future as long as you guys are up for it.
Absolutely.
All right, and Ranger fans, Red Wing fans, we'll see you guys next time.